Okay, so welcome to the last panel. I think we might run out of mics, so at least I'm just going to shout. So this panel we're going to talk a little bit about the future of ICTD. You might know most of our panelists here, but let me briefly introduce. Suresh Loda is a professor of computer science at UC Santa Cruz. Tom Khalil is from Berkeley. He's a special advisor to the Chancellor on Science and Technology and formerly worked in the Clinton administration. Tapan is professor of information school, and Ravi is a PhD student at the Atlas Institute in University of Colorado. So the main goal of this final session was to look forward from here to what might be the future of ICTD. What I'm going to ask is, there's two parts of this. First is Rabin Patra, who is actually this is not Sergiu Nedevsky. Sergiu kind of all of you, of course, you're free to talk about whatever, however you interpret the topic. But I am going to push Tom to talk about Obama campaign and what ICTD might mean in that specific context. Given that, I'm going to turn it over to Ravi to talk about the survey, and then we'll hop straight over to Suresh.
Alright, George, thank you. So I'm going to be brief in summarizing the results of the survey we did. I'll try not to comment, I'll leave the experts to do that. So this was a survey that is an online survey that we did, and we got many of your friends and other people to answer the survey. As you can see, we have a pretty good representation from faculty, researchers and students. Most of the respondents were in research, so the ICTD researchers, but we have quite a few of practitioners as well. So I'm going to just present the results from a few questions that we asked them, and then we'll get the experts' opinions on that. So one question we asked people was, what did you think about how rigorous ICTD research has been? And you can see that, well, about 50%, more than 50% didn't think that that criteria has been sufficiently evident in ICTD research. Secondly, 50% and more of the respondents also thought that ICTD has been hyped to some extent in the research community, but a lot of the research, a majority of them also felt that it has brought a lot of focus to multidisciplinary research as well. So these are kind of the three interesting responses we got. Finally, we tried to find out from our respondents what did they think about the potential and actual impact and potential negative impact of ICTD research on certain domain areas. So these areas of development we picked up from the Millennium Goals of the UN. So you can see that this is, we ordered them according to what people thought which areas had the maximum potential impact. So those areas at the bottom, and then the top we have areas such as hunger and environment and gender equality, where people didn't think that ICTD could have impact. In fact, a lot of respondents thought that ICTD could have negative impact, or it actually has already had negative impact on those areas of development. So that's something that I hope our panelists would comment on. Thank you. Yeah.
So I would like to say that for me, after the dialogue that started yesterday between Kentaro and Jenna about visualized. So you may think of what you are trying to do is generalizable, or go to the next step of Jenna, which says at least you speak to the generalization. But I will actually even take a more extreme view, saying that if you can make a difference in the life of one individual, I think that's a very good metric as well. And I think American people understand that very well. If you have made difference in the life of Ramu the sweeper, or Budhya the housewife, or Joe the plumber, then I think you have succeeded. And then it's for somebody else to find out what was the ideas behind that is generalizable. The second point that I want to speak to is something that I found the dialogue is not emphasized or somewhat missing, and that's B. So to me, it's D, which is development that I already spoke about, via business and ICT. So I want to sort of dwell a little bit on the business part. And to business, not just in terms of making money, but in terms of, I think business people are very good at assessing the user needs and whether the product is marketable, not just in the sense of making money, but does it really fit in the socio-political context. And within that, I'm very interested in finding out why Kentaro is doing what he is doing, or why some members of the audience in the corporations, why they are here, but only within the real context of a larger ethnographic research, trying to understand why the system is really allowing them to do what they are doing. Kentaro may not really know the answer to that question. I am seeking that kind of an answer from social scientists. So to end, I would say, how does it tie in with the UCSC? I'm a computer science person, and I want to take this time to thank James Davis and Adam Thompson, who has actually done much more than me in this area at UCSC. But what we are trying to do is to create curriculum at the undergraduate level, and I will end with a question that I will pose to you, to which I have some answers. But the question is, how do I train undergraduate students so that Eric or Tapan says, oh, Suresh, I would like to have this student as a graduate student in my program. Or Kentaro says, yes, please send me this student, he's well prepared to do work with me at Microsoft Research in India. Or a field person actually somewhere in Africa, Ghana, says, Suresh, send me that person, and this person will be really useful to me. So what kind of education or curriculum should be designed so that these people can actually make a difference? So to me, the metric is, certainly metametrics are whether Tapan and Matthew can get tenures, but the real metric to me is that if I walk 10 years down the streets of India, then there is a person who comes up and says, well, these people who came from USA or from wherever else really made a difference in my life. So that's what motivates me. Thank you.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here. And as Joyajit said, I had the good fortune to be able to work for President Clinton for 8 years, from 93 to 2001, as we say, during those dark days of peace and prosperity. And what I wanted to speculate about is drop any pretense of objectivity and get you to imagine that it's November 5th, and Barack Obama is going to be the next president of the United States, and whether how and whether ICT4D might be part of the agenda for his incoming administration. And I think it's very clear that he's interested in technology, and I think that when the history of the 2008 campaign is written, the role that technology will play, it will be an important part of that story. The way he's used that for voter mobilization, the way he's used that for fundraising and for giving people a sense that they're a part of his enterprise. And I know from his position papers that technology is going to be a part of his agenda. And he's also interested in global development. So since this issue is at the intersection of those two, there's every reason to believe that this is something that he or the people who are advising him might be open to promoting some sort of initiative in this area. So the second point that I wanted to make is that I believe that this community, rather than viewing policy as sort of this black box and something that's a given, something that you should be trying to influence and inform. And there are a couple of different ways to do that. One is that Berkeley has many faculty members who have done a rotation through Washington. Randy Katz, who's a professor of computer science, had a very important impact on the technical agenda associated with the administration's IT policies. And Shankar Sastry played an important role as the director of the Information Technology Office at DARPA. Rujna Baichi in computer science was the director of SIZE, which is the agency that was responsible for funding ITR. So that's one way, direct service, but another way that doesn't involve quite that level of time commitment is really to come up with some specific actionable policy recommendations. And let me just sort of throw out, in the interest of giving you something specific to think about, three scenarios which I could see happening, going from relatively modest to more ambitious. And these are not mutually inconsistent, so these things are all things that could be pursued in parallel. The most modest thing that I could imagine is persuading a funding agency like the National Science Foundation that there should be a research program in this area. So let's imagine that SIZE and the international part of NSF get together and say, hey, we think this is an important enough area so that there should be an ICT4D research program that has a budget in the low tens of millions of dollars a year. And therefore, the assignment in that case would be to say, well, what would such a program fund? What short, medium, and long-term goals would it have? What are the portfolio of types of projects that you would want to support? What would you do to try to ensure that that wound up having an impact? So that's one scenario, and that is something that would be relatively straightforward to get done. In something that might be more ambitious is imagining a broader interagency effort in information communications technology. So imagine that President Obama convenes a cabinet meeting in which this issue is discussed, or there's what in Washington is called an interagency working group, where you pull together a number of different federal agencies and give them each a responsibility for thinking about how they might promote this. So the FCC might be given the responsibility of trying to encourage their counterparts in developing countries to promote telecom policies that would foster the diffusion of information communications technologies. The Centers for Disease Control would be promoting applications related to disease surveillance. The Treasury might be trying to influence some of the multilateral development banks. So one could imagine the homework assignment in that case would be looking at the array of federal agencies and trying to figure out what's something that they could do that would have a positive impact on IT for development. The third scenario is the president's use of the bully pulpit. So one of the underappreciated powers associated with the presidency is the ability to ask people to do things. Eric knows about this firsthand. He was at a reception with President Clinton and went to him and said, it would be really easy to develop a search engine that would allow you to someone to instantaneously search all of the documents of the federal government. And President Clinton looked at him and said, great, why don't you do it? And so Eric took that challenge on, and that was the basis of something called FirstGov, which is a government-wide search engine. So imagine that you have just been given the responsibility of organizing a rose garden ceremony on information and communications technologies. And so you have the ability to call anyone up on the planet and ask them to come to this and say, the president is going to be talking about the importance of using harnessing the information revolution to have in ways so that it will have an impact on all these goals that we've talked about: poverty alleviation, making government more open and transparent. And these are some things that I would like you to consider doing. So this is something that President Clinton used to do routinely. He would travel around to parts of the country that were not enjoying the benefits of the economic boom in the late 1990s: East Palo Alto, South Central LA, Indian reservations, and we would put out the word on the street to businesses, and we'd say, the president will be going here, and he's very interested in highlighting any actions that the private sector is willing to take to contribute to economic growth and job creation in these particular regions. So a third tack on this is how you might use the power of the presidency to convene, to mobilize, to use moral suasion to get people to do things. And this is something that President Clinton has continued to do through a project that I'm involved in called the Clinton Global Initiative, where he invites 1,000 heads of state, CEOs, heads of foundations and nonprofits, and asks them to make a commitment to do something. So if you were responsible for organizing that event, who would you call? What would you ask for? What's the reinforcing set of commitments that you would be trying to get? So if there are people who are in the audience who would be interested in working on fleshing out any of those ideas, I'd be happy to help you market those answers if you can come up with some of them. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. So I completely agree with Suresh that I think ICTD is about development. And I think even more than development, it's about actually the process of development. And actually that's one category that I don't see there, which is actually the process by which development occurs. And I think what really distinguishes development from other kinds of activities is that it's at its core a collaborative and learning process. And I think collaboration and learning require a much different kind of consideration of information and communication and exchange than what we have been used to in other kinds of economic processes. How this kind of learning and communication happens right now, I think this is really the opportunity for where we can introduce novelty also. How this communication and learning happens right now, the way it's termed is called monitoring and evaluation, M&E, right? And I think that is a fundamentally wrong concept. What that implies is that someone from somewhere else has a scheme or an idea, and they've imposed it somewhere, and they want to see whether or not it's worked, right? And I think this relates fundamentally to the kinds of topics that Joyjit was talking about, like the imposition of middle-class aspiration on rural communities, right? I think really what we want to do is to provide an opportunity to really learn from the actual needs, the actual desires, the actual aspirations of people in context, and to give both the opportunity and the channel for those to reach the people who have the resources and the capacities to provide those kinds of opportunities. And I think that the underlying thesis behind that statement is that I firmly believe in my own experiences, I have learned much more about life from the people I've worked with in the field than they have learned from me. I've learned much more about what it means to live a good and happy life from the communities that I've worked with in the field in rural India than they have learned from me. I truly and honestly believe that. And I think we as a developed society have a lot to gain from those communities that we are quote unquote trying to develop. We have a lot to learn from those communities. And the exact goal that I have in mind is to provide an opportunity and a channel for that expression to occur. So that's the first part of the process that I think is really important, to actually turn the process of development upside down so that the whole idea of who's being developed is thought about differently. The other part of it, and I think this relates to how process and how ICTD relates to computer science and more broadly to the world of engineering, is that it actually introduces the notion of process much more deeply into the computing and the engineering communities. And what I mean by that is that traditionally within computer science, process has only been considered in the user interface design, HCI community, and to some degree in the software engineering community. And I think those limited. In one sense, they're limited in the scope of the artifact that they consider, and in the other case, they're limited by the scope of the process they consider and the scope of the context they consider. And I think actually, especially given the kinds of circumstances we're working in, where the human context, the physical context, the application context is so different, the importance of taking a broad view of process and also of end-to-end application design is actually very, very important. And I think this is how ICTD can actually push on the broader computer science and engineering disciplines to consider process as a part of all aspects of system design, implementation, and evaluation, so that actually we understand what systems to build, how to build them, and whether or not they actually serve the purposes for which we built them. So these are my two things about how I think the future of ICTD should go.
Thank you. My name is Revi Sterling, and I'm thrilled that Joya Ajit asked me to be up on this panel. Joya was hugely instrumental in me leaving Microsoft and going back to graduate school because I saw what he was doing and I was jealous. So thank you, Joya Ajit. But you're no longer my academic hero. I think Jenna is. So. All right, still, there's room for two. But piggybacking, I was really going to talk about the need for master's programs and practitioners. That was going to be my looking forward piece. But I just couldn't, I just couldn't keep that within earlier today, as you know. So I had to come up with something. It's not like I don't have plenty of rants about this. But I was thinking of something that, looking back, might help us look forward a little bit in making our ICT D4 and ICT and N4 development initiatives more successful. And that's something that Joya Ajit talked a little bit about, with, the discourses around technology. I'd like to see us be a little more conversant in the discourses around development in the communities that we work in. What I mean by that is we're pretty good now. We've learned from social scientists that we're supposed to listen to the community when they define development, but also understanding what's happened before in terms of other development initiatives, not ICT for development, but any development initiative, and what the legacy of that has been at the psychosocial level of people, at the environmental level of people, et cetera, so that we know the history coming in. The communities that I work with, mostly in Eastern and Central Africa, see development as a place to get to. If I do this, I'll achieve development. I'll be at development. And that's a very different way than we look at ICT for D. In this, development is a process. We're a tool set in this roadmap of development. We have, words like deployment and pilot and roadmap, which is kind of a very different metaphor of geographies than what a lot of communities, the women I work with, go, well, if I do this, I'm developed. And I think that we need to be much more aware of that going into our projects. Because otherwise, I think we run the risk of delegitimizing ICT as a development initiative. And I want to bring up 3 points. These are things that we don't necessarily think about. I'm sure many of you do actually think about these, but you're probably the rarity as opposed to the rule. How do we not delegitimize ICT and do eventual long-term damage? One, we need to be better about setting expectations of what the research is. People like me, graduate students, people on limited budget, timeframes, et cetera, we're leaving. We're leaving the community at some point. I applaud that EWB, Engineers Without Borders, has a 5-year commitment they make to a community they go into, but again, that's 5 years. We go in and there's no telling what's going to happen to our projects, pilots, and technologies when we've pulled up our roots and gotten our data and leave. How will these technologies be appropriated? What will ministries of informations and broadcastings do when we leave? What about the NGO that we think we're being responsible with in leaving the project when they go under as fast as a restaurant does in San Francisco? There's a lot to think about in terms of our responsibility to the community once we have worked with them on a project, because the world doesn't need yet another broken, abandoned, development project. Second of all, there seems to be this notion that we're not supposed to pay for research once we're in the community. And the communities I work with don't really get that, and it's very strange. I'll be on an 8-hour bus ride, I'm on the matatu, I'm sitting with the chicken, I get out and I go to this radio station, community radio station. I'm pretty sure I'm the only white person that's ever been there. I feel like the modern day female version of Richard Burton. And, the people at this radio station show me a stack of business cards of the ethnographers that have gone there before me. And they're pissed, and they don't want to talk to me. And they're like, oh, so you're here to ask me more questions. What do I, station manager, agricultural extension officer, midwife, what do I get out of this? And I go, well, you're helping me with my research? And they'll say, well, so-and-so from, and this has happened, I've seen cards from everyone, Intel, HP, Microsoft. I saw my old boss's card once. He's like, your old boss promised me a computer. We're promised we're going to be part of pilots. We're promised this, and you gave me a hat. And there seems, and we're delegitimizing tech. These people don't want to friggin' work with us after we've gone there and picked their brains and then left. Gotten the picture and gone. And the whole idea, that I'm going to bring them a 6-pack of 7-Up and a baseball cap from University of Colorado doesn't hold much water. So knowing that ICTD needs to be a business and a value proposition, not only for those that we do pilots with and collaborations with, but those that we get research and data from. It is not enough for me to go say, well, I need a bunch of comparative data, and I'm going to go get that, and then I'm going to pick that community to work with. What about the other 6 communities I picked dry and then left? So the next time someone goes there, they're going to be like, yeah, do you need more research? It's embarrassing to me, and I think we need to figure out how we are going to make this important to the communities that we work with so they actually want to work with us. I think we're going to get much better information when we are actually making it a level exchange playing field. It's a business. It's a business for the communities involved. They have something valuable. They have knowledge. The other thing that I think we're going to need to look at going forward if we don't want to delegitimize technology and our pilots in the long run are issues around informed consent. And people think you can get out of that because we're not, you're doing projects outside of a university. But it's informed consent in a different kind of way. It's an opt-in type of participation into an ICTD project rather than having it, rather than forcing a participation model. I would rather see people say, I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to sign this piece of paper. I don't know what this piece of paper says I do, than to participate in an ICTD pilot and give me the information they think that I want to hear. I say this because I got a chance to work with Kentaro and the Microsoft Research Labs in India around working with technologies and emerging markets research with honest-to-God people and participants actually meant. And again, it goes back to that setting of expectations. This is only for a limited amount of time. I am not going to be here in 6 months. This may or may not work. You may or may not get a benefit. You might be embarrassed if you hear your name on the air. Giving people the opportunity to not be shocked or dismayed or let down from the hype and promise and futurity in which we talk about ICTD. So I think changing the discourse around technology and development in a much greater way is super important. Okay, rant over.
Okay. So we have a very short, 10 minutes left in the room, unfortunately. So it's been a great conversation, and therefore we're going to have to squeeze into 10 minutes. Anybody has a question, raise your hand, keep it really brief, and let's take it from there. Yes? One. Okay, so RJ, you haven't asked any questions. Lakshmi, you've asked a lot. So I'm going to go with George and RJ, and then I'll come to you.
Okay, I just want to thank the panelists for, especially the last two, for focusing on the D in ICT, 4D or AND-D. It's great to solve problems, but if you look at all of these issues, these are under development. They're not under development themselves. And it's great that all of this community works together to solve some of the problems, but ultimately, until what lies behind these problems is looked at, the real power of ICT for development is not going to be addressed. Development is what? It's really very simple. Some of you have mentioned it. It's opportunity, it's process, it's power, and it's hope. Those four together, and they're all related, that's where I think the best thinking about ICT for development has to focus on. And you'll do it by working on these problems, but you shouldn't forget that what lies behind them are those four things, and that's what really needs to change.
these are actually taken from the Millennium Development Goals, I think so.
So, Tap, I really resonated with your comment that you felt like you had gotten way more out of your experience with people in the field than they had ever gotten from you, and this also speaks to what Ravi said. So, kind of from the opposite perspective, and I just wanted to share that my experience, and one of the reasons why I've been so involved in Africa as opposed to other places is because of my own experience as a musician, and I play African percussion and dance some, and that sort of personal connection has really enabled a kind of in-depth relationship with the people that I deal with that I don't think ever would have been possible if I hadn't had a sort of deeper, albeit perhaps superficial, but at least deeper understanding of the sort of cultural aspect or the culture from a completely unrelated perspective, but which I think has a lot of value to the people that I was dealing with. And so in some sense I almost feel like it's giving back to the community by being involved with their community and showing your own interest in their lives and what you feel like you can get from how you feel you can enhance your life from the things that are intrinsic to these people. So, not really a question. I just wanted to add to what you had said.
Maybe I can just respond quick. I mean, I really resonate with that. I really resonate with what Ravi said about there being a need to make a commitment, to actually deliver. And it's fundamental to, I think, the discussions we've had over the last 2 days that has to be part of it. And again, getting back to the part of process, I don't think the process has to stay here. What we really need to do is democratize the process. What's really exciting about technology and the internet is like people helping themselves, like the internet, the web, Wikipedia, DIY culture. We do it here, why can't they do it there? And I think that's what's exciting about ICT, and that's what's exciting about ICTD.
Okay, so we have Lakshmi and Curtis. Is anybody else, or is that going to be it? Nobody else? Okay, so one sentence for Lakshmi.
Two really quick points. One is I get hammered day in and day out on the Sachs-Easterly debate being at NYU. $2.3 trillion of aid, 50 years, and we have nothing much to show. That's been basically a big failure of the development agenda as many people are trying to push it. So ICTD should not fall into that trap. And the second related point to that is, if ICTD should not fall into that trap, I think we really need to figure out how to make it a business initiative. Because at the end of the day, if there are a bunch of people who are working on it based on passion, but if it can really give rise to jobs, I think that's when we really start cutting the deal. So.
Okay, so my question is about policy mostly, because that sounds to be a really interesting viewpoint for things. It seems as though you had a very U.S.-focused area of policy due to presumably political leanings, if anything. But is there any thought to ways? Like a big part of the problem is policy in the field and on the ground, and there's like you just have to land it. As a computer scientist, if I had to deal with in any way changing or dealing with the policy of, like, it's hard for me to understand the policy there. I tried to set up a community radio in India, and it turned out I could have gone to jail for 3 years. Like, that took me 3 weeks to figure out when I was, presumably in someone's theater there. So that just seems like a really difficult problem and a really wide problem, and just so much more to deal with when we're already confused.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that we talked a lot about top-down versus bottom-up, and for me, and part of this reflects my background as a top-down technocrat, that ideally one would want to be able to figure out the best of both worlds. That is, have a certain amount of top-down leadership and having that empower and enable lots of grassroots creativity and action by individuals and businesses and community-based organizations. So, for example, even within Africa, there are huge differences in per minute charges that stem from whether you have one carrier or 5. So this question about how to figure out creative ways to influence those policies, I think is something that's very important. And, obviously, that may not be the easiest contribution for an individual CS graduate student to make, but I think it is something that the broader ICT4D community could have an impact on by helping to call attention to these, and not only to promote a dialogue between the United States and developing countries, but even within developing countries as well.
Okay. Thank you. So I have only a few things to say. Remind you basically that we're going to do something next, and I don't know what it is. So one important thing is, if you'd like to be involved in what's next, let me know. And if you have an idea of how you want to be involved, let me know that too. And because at the moment it's pretty wide open what this might be, and I'm intentionally leaving it open until I kind of get a sense for all the kinds of bodies that would like to be involved some way or another. And if all you want to do is know what we're doing, I'm happy to just let you know what we're doing as well. But I think given the size of the attendance, which was surprising and positive, I think, I take that as a sign that people would like to be involved, and I'd like to make room for you in whatever makes sense. So please tell me what that is. Thank you to Melissa Ho in particular. This definitely needs applause for this. She's the kind of person every group needs to have several of. We seem to have several of, but she's particularly special on many fronts, and I mean that in a truly positive way. So you should watch her career. It's going to be interesting. I don't know where it's going to go, but worth watching. I'm looking forward to it. And I have a gift for you, which of course I forgot, but it's good. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is just go back to this. I agree with Tom said. I think I do want to sort out what this is. In the end, there's going to have to be top-down parts for all kinds of reasons. I think mostly because I found it's people like President Clinton and even the groups Intel and Microsoft are pretty good at affecting policies in the 54 different countries of Africa. And if you don't have some kind of unified top-down presence and influence, it can be quite a big mess. I mean, it's quite a big mess already, the heterogeneity of these countries. So it's not that I'm completely opposed to the top-down efforts. It's that I feel like they should be helping the bottom-up efforts. That's their purpose, which is not how it's been played to date. So I leave this up as really, again, roughly where I'd like to go, kind of philosophically, but again, that's not clear to me exactly how to do it, and feedback is welcome on this front as well. So with that, two last things. First of all, personal thanks from me for coming. I'm touched, and these students have been great, and it's the end of a certain kind of 5-year period of my life, and it's the work's going to continue, but I know this is a special day for me and for the students as well. So it's really been great. And so thank you to all the students. And I'm supposed to give you some like we need to clean the room up and we need to get out. So we're done. Thank you very much.